We're live.
Welcome, everyone. This session is all about creating new things. That's kind of vague intentionally. We will hear how three of our digital leaders have created new companies, new work models, and new applications. What did it look like when Dynamo was being born? How about LadyBug or Arculab? What are the hardest parts about starting your own venture or transforming a culture from within your firm? The panel is a great place to ask those kinds of questions. So start now by saying hi in the panel. They can see your chat. With that, I am so glad you joined again. My name is Tim and Hazel. I'm a senior technical designer at Entrepreneur, and I'm so grateful to have tonight's guests. And as you can see next to me tonight, we have another great guest. Great guest host. Say hi to Kyle over there. Kyle is the perfect guy to be asking the panel about starting things. He himself has been at the forefront of creating collaborative groups. Just like our panel, I don't know where he finds the time for this, but he's founded Dynamolitia, Beyond AEC Hackathons, and Encode Boston. I'll let him take it from here. Thanks, Kyle, for joining us again.
Yeah, thank you, Timon. So welcome, friends, joining us from all over the world. It's been awesome to see this, how successful this series has been, and see all the people that have participated and been keeping along with the videos and the comments. So Your Desk University is a series of technical presentations and expert panels that are intended to help keep this global design technology community connected with all these challenging times that we're facing. A reminder that there are more series and more presentations that will be happening in the coming weeks. The next one is on Tuesday, May 5th, and it's going to be co-founder Timon here, who works at Walter P. Moore. He's going to be focusing on Grasshopper, Dynamo, and PyRevit, titled One Python to Three Homes. And if you're looking for details on not only his session, but the other sessions coming up, go ahead on over to yourdeskuniversity.com for more details and to learn all about what's on the horizon. So I'm really honored to be hosting this discussion panel today. And as Timon introduced, it's called Making New Things. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our esteemed three guests that we have, our experts. First is Ian Keough. He is the founder at Hypar, the famed father of Dynamo, formerly trained as a fine artist and architect. And he's previously worked at companies such as Autodesk, Bella Systems, Go Build, and Bureau Happold. We also have Mostapha Sadeghipour Roudsari, who is the co-founder of LadyBug Tools and Pollination Cloud. He holds a master's in architecture and environmental building design from the University of Pennsylvania. He's formerly worked at Adrian Smith and Gordon Gill in Chicago, Thornton Tomasetti Course Studio, New York, and as a lecturer at UPenn. And then he's frequently a passionate lecturer at AEC industry events in various schools and universities. And last but not least, we have Konrad Sobon. He's currently an entrepreneur. His wife likes to call it unemployed. That's his joke, not mine. He is the co-founder of BadMonkeys and Bimbeats, an avid writer of code, recovering architect. He formerly served as design technology specialist at HOK and Grimshaw, and he's a really avid NBA fan and open source believer. So I just wanted to remind you all that during this session, as Timon mentioned, there is a comments thing. So if you guys want to just pop in there to say hello, ask questions, follow up to some of the topics we'll be discussing tonight, feel free to chime in. This is intended to be a community event, just not the four of us talking. So feel free to go for it. Okay, so if the guest panelists will go ahead and reveal themselves, we'll go ahead and get this thing started. Excellent, the big reveal. Okay, so for the first question that we have, we're gonna get right into the deep stuff here. So you all have previously served at big companies and have been passionate contributors to the AEC industry in various ways. Then at different times, you each have decided to pivot into creating brand new companies. For Ian, it was Hypar. We got Konrad working on Arculab, BadMonkeys, and then we got Mostapha for LadyBug Tools. Please tell us a little bit more about how you think creating new software offerings and alternate ways of working is just what this industry, the AEC industry, needs. Whoever wants to take it from there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Were you going to bite the bullet, Konrad, or should I?
no, go ahead. Go ahead. You're the elder statesman in here.
Well, I think the important thing for people to think about when they think about new startups and people making new things in AEC is that all of these people were sitting at their desks one day working on actual project work, or a lot of these people. I mean, certainly all the guys that I'm looking at here. And they figured something was missing, something couldn't be done with the tools as they were. And they said, things could be materially better about this industry if this tool existed. So that's one layer of like day-to-day stuff that people develop just because it has to exist to get the project work done and get it done better, faster, cheaper, whatever. And then there's another level of stuff that's happening in our industry right now and is accelerating, which is kind of like startups who are coming out to try and solve some of what they see as the kind of systemic problems, not the day-to-day just little things like let's make this go a little bit faster, but what are the fundamental problems with our industry and what are the tools that need to exist to solve those.
Can I be a party pooper?
Someone's got to do it, I guess.
I never. So that's a deep question with a deep answer for me. I mean, I don't really have a deep answer to that. Because for me it was like the industry, the concept of industry. It's just like an abstract thing for me. It's like, why would you start a company? It's for me it was never a thought of making the change in the industry or whatever it might be. It's more like I just wanted to try something new. That was it. I didn't even not like the job that I had before. Actually, as a matter of fact, I loved both of them and all the previous ones that I've had. So I agree. I completely 100% agree with Ian's point. Like making new tools is very important in the industry, and if that's what we're doing by starting new companies, then that's great. That's amazing. But for me, it was always just I just want to try new things, see what's out there. I didn't really have a big overarching plan of changing the industry or fixing anything.
Yeah. So for me, it had a natural process. Again, like I didn't make a decision of like, let's do this for the industry at that point. Maybe I wanted to solve my own problem. Then I thought like it's other people's problem. And I always had this feeling of if you want to solve a problem, you need to have a community who, grow together. And that was kind of like what LadyBug started, a community. And then like it started to be more developers. At some point, it was just so big for me to just have a daytime job and take care of what LadyBug tools started to be. So I had to take it. I was just like, I think it goes to what Ian said at some point. I'm like, if this thing is going to really exist and I can see the value, I have just to take the risk and say like a start a company and try to make it sustainable.
That idea, I just wanted to touch on that idea of community real quick. I'm really glad you brought that up, Mostapha, because all of us are kind of an age that when we started in this industry, these kinds of little communities around specific specializations, whether it's computational design or energy analysis or whatever, kind of didn't exist. If a community existed at all, it was for a piece of software. Like there was a Revit community, but now we're in this place where like there's energy people and there's computational geometry people and there's cloud people and real-time simulation, AR, VR people. And so this idea of also wanting to go out to start a community to bring that community together to solve some of these problems, I think is really crucial as well.
Well, you started a new community yourself. I'm gonna bring up Dynamo in here. I'm gonna wedge Dynamo in there.
It's true. I mean, it was a layer on top of the Revit community though, right? And it was also kind of like, filching people a little bit from the Grasshopper community. Because I was, at the time that started, I was in the same kind of position as a lot of people, which was that we were using Rhino Grasshopper to do like project work, but we had to deliver stuff in Revit. And there was this disconnect between that. And we were writing all these adapters and like sending file data back and forth. And it was crazy. So that goes back to Mostapha's point about, solve the problem you have for yourself. That was actually a real problem I had for myself on real work. And that resonates, that kind of empathy really resonates when you do go to create that community.
I don't know how many people know, but BadMonkeys really started out of the Dynamo community. So the Dynamo forum was I'm gonna be a party pooper here again. The Dynamo forum was so bad originally. Like, I don't know if you guys use like a WordPress template to make it or something. Whatever it was so horrible, so bad that we actually took a couple of the guys that are now BadMonkeys. We took it off the forum and started talking on Slack and Facebook, and that's how BadMonkeys started. It was literally because you guys used the WordPress template.
You are correct, and that thing got shut down like all the time by people spamming it, and it was terrible. I can't even remember, because we weren't like, Autodesk didn't give us any money to make a forum, because it wasn't like an official Autodesk forum, so we had to just kind of like baling twine and duct tape the whole thing together. It got much better once we got on Discourse later on, but I will say, entities like the BadMonkeys who spun out of the stuff that we've created, and whenever you create a community and then you see people like turn that into a business, that is one of the most fulfilling things that I think can ever happen in your life. Like to see that kind of success and bringing people together in that way, that's a very cool and cherished part of the Dynamo thing for me.
Oh, great start, guys. I also like your comment, Konrad, about how it's not a matter of like, oh, this thing doesn't exist, I guess I have to pop out a company to create it, but building on the positive experiences you've had, and as you gain more expertise, realizing that there's an opportunity to create something of your own and contribute more, whether it's the forum, whether it's new tools or whatever. So on the topic of Dynamo, since Konrad brought it up, let's talk a little bit about technology. So I know you guys, your companies address very different aspects of the community and of the industry. And like Ian said, about how there used to just be maybe a Revit community, and now there's all these different expertise floating around. Can you guys each name at least one technology that you believe will be critical to the future of designing and realizing buildings? And then if applicable, can you please explain specifically how your company is kind of taking on that mission to harness that expertise?
I can start on that if you want. I can go backwards from company, but I think whatever that makes, so if we go through this data, right? Data, information, knowledge, and wisdom triangle, and go up. Data was a problem before for a long time. We couldn't generate data. It was hard. Now with all this automation things, it's becoming easier and easier to generate data. And changing this data to some information that can be useful to create knowledge, I think will be the next challenge. And whatever technology that makes this thing easier, this transformation from like all this data to some knowledge that you can basically use to make better buildings, I think they'll be useful, whether that's like machine learning or is just like a regression or better visualization. I think all of those are very important. And back to the company, the LadyBug tools has been started as an educational tool. It's intentionally made not to be very easy. It's easy to start, but it's not what we say easy to start, impossible to master, because you have to earn your points before being able to do something. Again, I like a lot about like gaming. Like people become a better gamer by playing more. It's not like the best game is the easiest game. I think the best software is not the easiest software in that case too. So when you use that tool, you feel better. And Pollination Cloud that we're building is also in the same line, like how we can just make it easier for people to generate that data that can be used to meaningful information that can be used for us to gain new knowledge to basically make better buildings.
So
I think we talked about this before, Mostapha, when you were saying we're sitting at the restaurant table and you were telling me that like you want to attach a 10-question test to every component that you publish in Grasshopper. Like,
yeah,
you're not
I still
allowed to
have
fail
this.
the test.
So if it happens someday, people should know. I had this idea of like if somebody running like daylight simulation, let's say annual daylight 10 times, then the question comes out like, do you know if you're what type of a sky are you using? 5 questions, 5 like options. If you do the wrong one, it deletes everything from your computer. So LadyBug does all this stuff. So
I was giving you so much credit in the last question for talking about empathy, Mostapha, and now you're talking about giving an intelligence test to somebody.
Like if you don't know it, you shouldn't use it. It's just like dangerous. It's like driving a car with no license. You're gonna get into an accident. So yeah, I haven't done it because I don't know how people will take it, but like maybe that's a good Easter egg or something. I don't know. Yeah, that idea is still live.
So can I piggyback on Mostapha's quest for data? Because that's kind of been like the last few stops at the previous companies that I worked at. It's kind of this gradual growth from, you know, using Ian's tools originally, Dynamo, to kind of ad hoc pull some data out of the projects to be able to kind of better understand what everyone's working on, to, you know, when I was at HOK, we're building our own set of tools called Mission Control. And now where we at with BadMonkeys building a set of tools called Bimbeats, it's all about just, you know, pulling that data out of the different sources that the whole AEC industry has. And, you know, taking it to that next level, what Mostapha was mentioning, which is, you know, going through it and trying to understand and make sense of it, you know, convert your data into information and knowledge eventually. So that's what we're working on nowadays. I don't know how valuable in an industry changing that is. It's probably not, but just doing our part.
I'm glad you left the door open for me, Konrad, because I thought for sure that the thing that you were going to mention, and I guess maybe you didn't because it's not really a technology per se, but I'm just going to put it in that camp, is open source. You know, one of the things that we looked at when we started Hypar was the patterns of sort of practice in design firms and engineering firms around the world. And this idea that people are building the same things again and again and again and again. And the things that and the fact that they think things are intellectual property, which are not actually intellectual property. And coming out of the software world where you can start from nothing and have a good amount of something, whatever the kind of project is that you're creating, so quickly because you're building on the backs of like all of this work that's been contributed by these vast communities sharing their expertise. We looked at when we started Hypar, we looked at the open source community. We were like, everything we need to do needs to basically take that as a model. So we need to not only build the stuff open source, we need to build that community and get those people thinking like, I'm going to build a tool and put it on this platform and I'm going to share it with the world. And you need to make it easy to do, right? Because the other thing we noticed when we started the company was like the most fundamental stuff, like how do I make a 3D model of a beam? Why does that take like $100,000 geometry kernel to do that? That's locked up inside some huge proprietary software. All I want to do is represent some beams. And it goes through the entire sort of BIM stack, if you will, and all the quasi sort of open standards that we talk about having in this industry. So solving some of those problems, but then also piggybacking on top of a lot of the infrastructure that's been built around open source. So like Hypar, which is a platform for executing your functions, like executing your sort of expertise as logic and code. You know, those things are just repositories of code, like GitHub repositories. And you can like manage them in that way using that tool that was a tool that came up out of the software world. And so we're trying to transfer a lot of the learning that and infrastructure that's come up out of open source as a movement and apply that into AEC.
Well, so question for you, Ian, though, because you're not the only one. Mostapha's making a business out of an open source tool, so to speak, right? And how does that play into it? Like, keep making a decision that you're gonna make Hypar open source and all the tools, but at the same time you're running a business. Like, how does that affect it? Because for me, open source for me is like, anytime I make open source stuff, I never think of like ever that turning into a business and making money off of it. It's always been a hobby, you know, things that you do at nights and weekends. How are you guys dealing with that challenge?
It's a great question, and frankly, right now we're still in the making a big bet phase of this company. We're making a big bet that people want to work in this way, and that we can drag enough people along with us on the adventure, that this thing will pay off. But it'll only pay off if you can get the benefit of scale that comes from enough people getting on that bandwagon and saying like, this is the way we want to work, this is where we want to put our stuff, this is how we want to share our expertise, this is how we want to connect all of our design problems together. So it's a huge bet. And if you talk to me 6 months from now, who knows where we'll be. But there are massively successful companies out there built on open source. Massively successful. Now, they have a different kind of scale than we do. We have AEC people inside AEC tend to think, oh, but AEC is a big deal. No, AEC is like a tiny, tiny little thing compared to the rest of the world of software or whatever. So you have to capitalize on a lot of that. And that's what we're aiming to do. But, you know, I just didn't want to look, I worked at Autodesk for 5 years, 6 years. And I just didn't want to go out and start another company where, you know, I tried to like prove that my geometry kernel was better than your geometry kernel, or my version of BIM was better than your version of BIM. I kind of want those things to be defined by the community and come up out of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like, you should stop me at some point because I will talk about this a lot, but like just a couple of things, because I think like we have been running this company now like for a couple of years, and I want to distinguish a couple of things. One is we don't sell software, right? We don't sell open source software. Like we haven't done it. We don't want to do it. We are selling expertise and we are selling value that we are adding. Like what, going back to Ian's point, like that value can be scaling. That value can be expertise that you're sharing. So that's how we are making money out of the project that we have. And I want to distinguish, and I think like when Stackel went like, oh, we are a company now, I was just like, let's make sure your open source project is not your the selling point, your product. There is a major difference between your product and your project. And as I think like the more you just separate them, the easier it is to sell, because you can sell a product. It's really hard to sell a project. And I think you shouldn't sell your project because it's going to kill your project, especially for open source projects. What you want to get out of a project is different from what you want to get out of your product. And this is not coming from me. Like if you search your open source project is not your product, you will find the right article to read on redhat.com. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy.
Well, so the question is though, how do you balance and manage those two things now? Because now you have an open source project that probably, if you could and you let it, it would take up 100% of your time. And then on the other hand, you're trying to make a living and pay bills. So the only way to make money off of it is, like you were saying, is you allow people to hire you as a consultant to implement your tools, and you know, some way or another, you're adding value to the project itself. That's how you make a living. How do you guys balance those two?
Well, I mean, I didn't say it's easy. I just say it's possible. So the balancing is, and again, like the other, so and this is good, because if you going back there, if you want to go the easy way is like to make an open source version and then have a premium one that you sell, and then you have to keep your open source version crappy enough for people to pay for your premium, and then like your premium should just, and then like that's really hard to balance, because now you're just, okay, what am I going to do? Like how broken my open source project should be for people to get my premium and go backwards. That's the hard one. So I want to tell like the easier one is like now how we basically do this is we have this concept of tree, which I have shown a couple of times, I think in several places, that like you have roots and then you have like a trunk that comes up, and this is all open source, right? And this is like the base thing that you have to build before you get to the branches, which is like the exciting stuff that everyone can do. And when it comes to branches, I don't think it really matters if it's open source or it's not, because not that many people are going to build on top of that. That's like a script for something specific that someone wants to do to solve their own problems at that time. So what we have done, we basically say everything that we do open source should make this trunk, this tree better, so we can go, you know, higher and higher. And then when it comes to making money, we basically focus on that branches that are specific things that they'll add value to, you know, a specific client that we have. But the good thing is now we can build platforms that basically makes, you know, it's just part of that tree that basically scales that thing up, that makes it accessible to more people. I think we are in a great time. Like, again, going back to what Ian said, like they have built so many things for us. Like EPW map, I made the decision to build it it was 21st of December, just like make something. I had a website up like in 2 minutes because GitHub has done everything for me, right? I didn't have to do anything. With GH pages, oh, here, Then I wanted to make a map, like 3 lines, you had a map because D3JS has done it for me. It's just amazing how many things we have, and we are building on top of those. So because of that, I think this is the right time if you want to do open source and make money, as long as I said, you don't mix and merge like your project and your product together.
So two points. I wanted to continue on Mostapha's point about, and I should be clear, we're building a lot of open source stuff in the same way that they are, but similar to what I think the LadyBug tool guys are doing is at some point when you deliver this stuff via the cloud to people, the infrastructure for running all that stuff costs real money. And so you have to hand those costs on to your customer. But the hope is that by delivering it in that way, it adds a lot of value in the same way that back in the day when we delivered, desktop software, making an installer so that all the bits got in the right place and the thing ran and showed up on your screen had value too. So I don't know if I agree with the idea of making sure that your open source project is broken enough that like people have to upgrade to the, and I know you were saying that kind of tongue in cheek.
Yeah, don't do that. Like, because a lot of people, when they have open source, the first thing that they think about is just like, why don't you make a premium version that you can sell versus because that's everyone told us when we started, like, why don't you make a LadyBug tools that we can buy versus the LadyBug tools that's open source?
Yeah,
and do not do that.
There's great examples of this actually out there in the world right now. Discourse, we talked about the forums for Dynamo earlier. That company was started by one of the guys who built Stack Overflow, and the whole thing is open source. Mm-hmm. But if you want them to take care of hosting it for you, you have to pay them. So you have to make a decision within your organization. Do we want to have this open source thing and we have to pay and have people on staff to maintain this thing? Or do we want to, is our value somewhere else and we just want to pay these guys to host this thing for us? And that, as more and more companies come out in AEC, we're going to see this happening again and again. The Speckle guys, they're starting their new company now. And right now, Speckle is totally open source and everything else, but you have to stand up your own server to run that thing. How many people amongst the listeners to this podcast know how to stand up their own server to do anything? So there's real value in them saying, here's the hosted solution and it costs you $10 a month or whatever it might be. And then one other thing I was going to tie into what Mostapha said, he said, how fast it is to get up and running on a website. We actually have a slide in our deck that is NPM is the node package manager. It's what JavaScript people use to build stuff, and it's got zillions of packages in it. We have a slide that's NPM install Stadium. And it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek thing that we show to like, what if all the different types of buildings that we build could start that easily, like could start from a template. It's not the right thing. It's not 100% of the building you want. But what if the capacity was out there for somebody to not ever have to start from a blank page like they do in the software world? You don't ever start from a blank page. You start from all these tools that other people have built. And I think there's just things about our industry that are holding people back from wanting to work in that way and wanting to share their stuff in that way.
Well, isn't there a little bit of a paradox there, though? And on one hand, you want people to start from a template. On the other hand, what we do in some capacity, Mostapha and myself probably as consultants, is we provide that service for people when we custom made software for them. So they can do things their way, and they can constantly just never, just never use the template that, a standard that everyone else uses, because no one in the architectural or engineering industry wants to have a standard and do the same thing as everyone else does, because for some reason being different and doing everything different is it's what distinguishes you, and that's how you get hired. So there's a bit of a catch-22 there. It's like,
and when cars first came out, you just bought the chassis, the wheels, the engine, and the drivetrain, and then you went to a coach manufacturer and they built you a special body for your car. And then Henry Ford came along and he was like, that's crazy. What people want is cheap cars. Now, the comparison there, every architect listening is like, well, that's a terrible analogy, because you're saying that like we should just live in cinder block buildings that all look the same because we can deliver those things via some like NPM package. That's not what I'm saying, but I think there's a gray area between these, and we have to sort of come to terms with this fact as an industry that not everything we do needs to be bespoke.
Well, but that paradox goes a little bit deeper. It basically goes to the nature of the human being, though. It's like not everyone's wired the same way. Not everyone thinks the same way, and one tool does not fit all. It's basically it never did, and that's how we started all of our journeys, by building those bespoke tools. Is because someone somewhere decided that this is how I want to get this done, and I don't care how somebody else did this. And this is one of the issues that we're having with all these open source projects. It's like we can put all those freaking open source projects up on the web, and no one never downloads or uses them as much as we would like them to use or contributes back to them. It's because people just want to keep building their own. It's just how we wire it. It's just never ending story.
Yeah, but I would argue some of that, and I promise we'll turn this back to Kyle at some point so he can ask more questions. But it's such a great conversation.
Keep on going. It's great.
I would say that there is still not this culture of sharing. You're absolutely right, Konrad. Look, Dynamo didn't get its first pull request. For those of you listening who don't know what a pull request is, it's when somebody outside of your software development team says, here's some code that I think would make Dynamo better. Would you pull this into Dynamo source code and make it part of Dynamo? We didn't get our first pull request till 5 years into that project. Hypar, we got our first pull request within 2 years of the start of the project. So, like, there is an ethos that is germinating in our industry. And I have hope that more and more people are going to see the power of this and how it's worked out in other industries. But we'll see. Again, talk to me in 6 months.
Are you worried though?
Am I worried? Of course I'm worried. If you're not worried as the CEO of like a venture-backed startup in AEC, you're brain dead.
Yeah.
Like, look at the companies who have come before me, right? Like, the number of conversations that I have every week about Flux and why people aren't going to talk to me because they made a bet on Flux and then Flux folded, and so that just kind of like erased all possibility of working. This is
literally one of the points that I bring up when we talk about Bimbeats and we talk to potential customers for Bimbeats, is that we're not venture backed. It's like we basically invested our time into this, and that's the only thing that's on the line. And any money that we can make is basically extra money that's going to keep us going. And we're never going to go out of business until we decide that we want to go out of business, because there's no upward, there's no downwards pressure on us.
Yep. Oh man, and there's a whole other conversation that we could, there's a whole episode of this thing that we could have, which is just about like, do you take money? Do you not take money? There's a lot of philosophical positions there, and absolutely, like, if you can make enough money to keep the lights on and not have to answer to anyone else, absolutely do it. But I think all of us will identify that in AEC, to get to the next higher orbit that this industry needs to get to, we need fuel. And the interesting thing, at least until the COVID thing happened, was that there was huge amounts of fuel being poured into this industry. For better or for worse, there's going to be a lot of failures, but there's going to be some successes there, and they are going to drag this industry along behind them.
Wow, great discussion, guys. This is awesome. And you've already like set up a bunch more topics that we might want to cover today, but we are getting some comments, and I think you guys actually answered a lot of them and questions people have asked about things like standards. It sounds like the way that you guys approach that is templatizing or kind of structuring the way that you want things to be in your open source projects, and also about supporting it and expertise. You guys actually offer that as a service, so that's a response to be able to help that. I like Mostapha's comment earlier about with building communities, essentially, or giving people a reason to participate in your tools. It's actually growing the expertise across the industry and expanding the community. Because of the open source component, you're allowing them this barrier to entry, this opportunity to get involved. So that's fantastic. So to springboard on where Ian left off there at the end, let's talk a little bit about how we think there can be this future symbiosis. So in the interwebs, Twitter, all that thing, we always see these arguments break down about the traditional roles that architects, engineers, and contractors play. You guys have all started companies and really demonstrated expertise in the past about all kinds of tool creation and certain domains and areas where you think the industry is going. So let's talk a little bit about how you think that these consultancies and specialty software development companies will actually form a symbiosis that will usher in the future of the industry, not necessarily replace or not necessarily, you know, default back to the traditional way of doing things. But what does the future look like as these two different entities merge to create a better future for AEC?
Well, let's hope they merge. I don't, I don't know. I don't know if they will merge, because it's, and I said that somewhere else too. I kind of feel like the way the industry is like a dinosaur, right? It's just like a heavy dinosaur, just has its own way of survival. And what we are as a smaller company is like some birds that are flying, like they're like agile and flying around and trying to do something. And I can't see a way of like this bird, like to inject two like, you know, two wings to that dinosaur and say, let's fly. It can't fly. It's just like that. It's not that animal. And again, I don't say that like we won't see change, but I think it will be a very slow process, or it will be something like how dinosaurs died and there was like, there is something else coming afterwards. Otherwise, we were like a small part of this whole industry. And I think like we just make change as much as we can. And we just try to make the dinosaur sometimes like go a better way as much as we can. But the dinosaur is a dinosaur. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
So you're arguing for evolution almost, like technology and developing new things is that mechanism for.
He wants a meteor to strike the Earth.
No. I'm in a slow food business kind of thing, you know. I think like things take time to be good. And this is the same thing. It will be a negotiation. We will see like a lot of the small companies fail. Even good, some of them are going to have like good things, but like nobody really cares at the time. So it will be a question of, you know, like a starting from something that adds value, find the right person or right company, and then next company, and it will be a slow process. And at some point, I don't think we will look at the history and say like at this point with this technology, everything changed. We just look, and like I look now like 10 years ago when I came to United States, right? When I started working at one company here, and I was like, oh my God, versus what's happening now, we had made a lot of progress. And I think a lot of that is because of these smaller companies that introduce new ways. But overall, the way we built buildings is still the same, right?
So if we're digging up clay tablets from 3,000 years ago, and that's basically how people used to build buildings, you know, freaking drawing them up on parchment and handing them over to someone who stacked stones on top of each other. That hasn't changed. It's not going to change. If we get hit by a meteorite, and 10,000 years from now, someone digs up our remains, it's going to be the same thing. They're going to find some parchment and some buildings drawn up on it.
So Konrad, I guess that to follow up to that comment, is the kind of things that you guys are looking at and that technologists are exploring potentially a means to introduce a new way of working, or will it always be anchored by the traditional ways that buildings are delivered?
I think the first thing I was saying is this concept of industry and changing industry is too abstract for me to worry about it. Basically, it's too big. It's like Mostapha was saying, it's too big and too old and too not prone to change whatsoever. That I don't even care. Like, who gives two shits about that? I'm sorry about saying that, but the only thing that I can do that's like sane, it's basically what I got from Mostapha. It's, you know, when I was first going up and learning how to write some code and whatnot, Mostapha was the guy that kind of introduced me to it, and he was my mentor, and that's basically how I got started, and that's all I do. And like that's what I want to do, is basically help myself, my family, and people that I run along, you know, just be better at what they do, and that's about all I, you know, if that makes any change in the industry, that's all you can hope for. I'm not hoping to change the industry. Like, that's not with the company, not by myself. It's just not possible.
You're
So
creating
one
pathways
interesting
for
thing
new
here,
people.
then we should let Ian talk. But interestingly enough, most of our clients are not architects and engineers. I can say like the clients that we kept are not architects or engineers. They're either how should I say, so you don't know who they are? They're like closer manufacturers, let's say. or consultants to those manufacturers, or like people who really like need this stuff because it's not a nice to have for them, it's a must have because their business is really running based on the service that we offer. So in that sense, I think what we do, like our tools are used a lot by architects and engineers, of course. I don't know how much it changes the way they finally design things, but I hope it changes the way we work all together. And I'm always concerned, like, how is really going to change the building? Then it comes like, how much really architects and engineers are building the building? And I think that's a philosophical thing to talk about. I don't know if we want to go there. But yeah, the closer you are to the site that people build it, I think like the more effect you can have at that point.
Well, so one thing I wanted to, I love Mostapha's analogies, and I'll stick with the one about the dinosaur with the little birds flying around. But if we as an industry just kind of throw up our hands and say, we're a dinosaur, we're always going to be a dinosaur, there's nothing we can do, let's just ride this dinosaur, whatever. I mean, that is so incredibly.
Wait. I didn't say let's just don't do
and anything. I know, but I'm just.
What I do, right?
I'm poking your analogy just a little bit, Mostapha. Okay. But what happens in every situation where technology encroaches on an industry is it starts to eat that industry from below. The sort of high calorie, low brain work, I'm stealing a term from Phil Bernstein there, gets turned into software. And we've only been resistant to that in this industry because we have this kind of Beaux-Arts tradition of us as being these like soul geniuses or whatever. And then we have this whole sort of legal infrastructure that's thrown up all these barricades between the various disciplines so that they can't share work in a real way. But imagine for a moment that instead of telling a young architect who's going out into practice right now that their life in practice, their 20, 30 years in practice is going to look exactly the same as their dad's life in practice, as their grandpa's life in practice, and said instead, you know what, in your lifetime, as the architect is designing their building, the structure is going to appear and it's going to be analyzed in real time. And you're going to get real-time design feedback from all the other people. Mostapha's services are going to be called to do energy analysis in real time while I'm moving walls around, while I'm changing the shape of the building. And you are going to have to deal with that as an industry because it's going to be a net positive. And if we don't, and if we just throw up our hands and say like, we're a dinosaur, and there's, you know, the birds are going to tweet around and every once in a while come in and pick up the droppings of the dinosaur, like we deserve, you know, we deserve what we get. It's frustrating to me to hear, especially, you know, the technical conoscenti in this industry say things like that, because we should be thinking like, how do we change from a dinosaur?
So that's the thing. Like I'm just zooming out, not to go for a dinosaur and kill myself, you know, as a bird, because I think like, again, like I don't, there might be something else that I can help. And again, like I'll do all the things that you said for the reason that I think a change will happen. But I can't think, as I said, like I don't think it happens like over one night. It will take a lot of time, and I don't think it happens to what we call in industry right now as is. That thing will be something different, you know. And I agree with you that we are all doing all these things. We're making change to build better buildings, to change the whole industry for better. For me, it's just like I was saying for a long time, all my goal was just to have those interns to stay all night, to just say, enter, run next analysis, just go home and have a better life. You know, just say run, it runs everything, you go home. That's a big thing for me. Like, I think they have better quality of life, everything is better, probably they have better ideas. But at the same time, I cannot say that the building industry is changing because of what we're doing. Or let's say like in the place that I am now, like you have all this stuff, let's make net zero at the time, we're doing net zero something. That means basically you don't understand like the whole system that comes together to make a building and how much control you have as a person who provides some simulation to people. What are you talking about net zero? Like, come on. And the same thing goes like, when we talk about building, it's just a complicated thing with all these things that goes together. And we're helping some part of it to be faster, to be better workflows, people work together better. But at the end of the day, if that thing needs to change, I think it's something like should happen in a different level that I don't have access to it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mostapha. I think what you're identifying is that change does happen in our industry, but it happens on a kind of a geologic timescale. So like anybody working in the industry at the time can't see it happening, but it happens over 100-year segments. Or the question I'm asking myself, and the question we're talking about at Hypar, is what are the things that, if they happened in the industry, would move us from a geologic timescale of change to like an instantaneous timescale of change? And unfortunately, analogies with other industries fall a little flat. But of course, you can point to hundreds of other companies out there that didn't even exist 10 years ago. Uber. The idea that like I would never have to own a car as somebody who lives in Los Angeles, and somebody would just show up at my house because like I have an app on my phone and then take me wherever I need to go, and it, you know, cars would be a sort of a consumption service, didn't exist 10 years ago. So, you know, let's imagine the same sort of systemic or fundamental change in AEC, and then ask ourselves, like, what would it really cost to have that kind of change, and is that change valuable?
Fascinating. Well, that again, Ian giving us an awesome segue. So speaking of change, the impetus for this whole technology series really was because of COVID-19, and because of the fact so many of us are sequestered in our homes and unable to meet as communities in different cities throughout the world. So we're trying to meet here digitally to have these type of conversations. So I know you touched on finances, Ian, and how that might be impacted, but what are some other ways that the current pandemic might impact the industry, specifically to technology? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I'm going to start this one off because I have a very specific internal argument that we have around this. You know, I'm imagining a future where somebody is using their big flat, you know, screen sort of device to do their design work wherever they might be. Anthony Houck, the co-founder of Hypar, 100% doesn't believe in that. And I don't know if it's a generational thing or whatever, but this idea that previously you went into an office where there were all these computers, these thousands of dollars of, like, now frankly supercomputers, underutilized supercomputing machines sitting under people's desks, and everybody had 3 monitors and everything else, and all the software that was delivered was kind of tailored to that experience. What's that going to look like now? Is everybody going to have a supercomputer at home, or do we actually start moving to a place where design software works like modern applications on modern devices that are frankly getting faster and faster than the supercomputer that you have under your desk?
Well, the issue I have with not working in the office is that human-to-human interaction. I've been working from home for over a year and a half almost now. It is ridiculous the amount of misunderstandings that you have with people just by talking on Slack. It's so ineffective, and as a tool for communication. And you know, even Zoom meetings or whatever you want to, Google Meets, whatever it is, it's just, I don't know. There's no way for us to replace the human-to-human, you know, interaction, conversation. And design is just so embedded with that, you know, like people talking to each other and going over things and explaining things to each other. So this idea of working from home, yeah, that feeds greatly into some, you know, some design genius, you know, bravado that, you know, I'm the one making all the decisions. Fantastic now, but that's never worked for a team. Like teams are, it's just destroying the teamwork.
You think so? Interesting, because we pre-COVID lifestyle COVID time, I have been working from home now, like I think around 5 years. And we started office as a remote office. We're still remote. We work remotely. And I think it took some time to establish how we want to work and how to communicate and like come up with new standards for doing all that. And I think actually we are more productive than a normal office of like you see people on a day-to-day, but we don't do design. We don't do like building design or something. We write software.
Well, part
and
of
all
the
the tools for writing software is designed to work pretty well remotely.
Probably part of the reason why we're having issues with this is probably because of the time differences. It's like Adam's in Australia, 16-hour difference. I can really talk to him early in the morning or late in the afternoon. So it's kind of screwing up with my regular day. And you know, but other offices, if you think about it, if all of a sudden the idea of working remotely and not everyone's in the same time zone, then that's the issue that you're going to be running into. It's like, you know, people's lives get all screwed up.
I think this is awesome because I've heard conversation with different practitioners and different colleagues all around the world that are like, wow, I've never worked from home and I've always wondered what it's like, and now I'm getting to experience that by force. But to hear you guys say it's not just about technology, it's about connection and about the ability to access people and make sure that your communications are understood. So maybe just to add on that, and we've seen a couple questions come in, is what is a way that you guys have banded together as teams, not technology per se, but like, do you have regular physical meetings where you guys all collect somewhere, or what are some of the mechanisms you found helpful to bridge those gaps when you're to regularly stay connected?
We
Yes,
were
so
supposed to do that in May. Physically, everyone get together. It's just we're
you
supposed
plan
to.
an out. You plan an outing.
It's just like it just happened. We had to cancel it. But I mean, this podcast is what they call it, funded by Basecamp. We use Basecamp, and it has been great as a communication tool. We don't use a Slack. I have a Slackophobia. I hate the Slack. I hate like this thing that comes up, bip, 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 bip. I mean, like all my notifications are off. There's no way to get to me like on my phone or anything. There's only like one channel my wife can get to me, because otherwise, yeah, it's
I
like a
can
life
confirm
issue,
that you do not call
right?
Mostapha. He never
Right.
answers
And
the phone.
that, yeah, like call my phone. I would never pick up ever. And it actually doesn't ring for me to pick up. But the thing is, like, I think the right tool, I think everyone should, and these Basecamp people, they are also a remote company. They have literally written books about working remotely, and they have a lot of great resources on their website. They didn't pay me to talk about their product here. But just, I think it has been great for us. I'm just putting it out there.
But there are other issues with working remotely. I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in really quickly. It's the human beings. There's something about my mindset when I go into the office that I'm at work. And no matter how much I try, and I've been working from home for a while, but it's hard. I don't know how not everyone can do this.
So you're saying being the proximity to others, or being in a, like, you step into a physical space that's work?
Yeah, literally. That puts your brain into a different wavelength or something, and it just makes you work. You feel like you're at work, as opposed to when you're home, you're still home, and how hard you try, it doesn't matter. You're still home. That fridge is still there, no matter how much I try not to look at it.
Not for me.
The Slack thing is very interesting because we started trialing. We're aggressive Slack users. Some of us more than others. We started trialing like 2 days of quiet time a week, which in software development, and I've been out of design for a long time now, so I can't really remember if this is a thing because Slack didn't exist at the time. But in software development, you need to get into kind of a deep state. You have to get into a flow. And any distraction from that can totally kill your day. So you got to answer a Slack message. You got to go answer it. Although we have highly productive members of our team who answer that stuff all day long and also manage to get a ton of stuff done. And so I don't know if it's like a generational thing.
Yeah, those are like the generation. Is it Andrew Human?
Yeah.
Totally.
Like, yeah, that.
I think he's actually like got a second set of hands that are like slacking away and emojiing and like looking up memes and sending us messages, while his other set of hands are like writing code and doing Figma and like all this stuff. Because I just 100% can't understand how
I cannot
they do
that.
I'm gonna keep arguing for the office. There's something about the physical separation when you have, because there's different modes of working, right? So like right now, my whole world is all screwed up because I'm doing freaking sales, development, everything. I'm taking meetings all day. That's just not how it's supposed to be. But normally when you like, if you're a software developer or whoever you are at your company, you kind of have your own space amongst other software developers. And the managers that do their meetings and organize their day every 30 minutes in 30-minute intervals, they sit somewhere else, like literally physically somewhere else. They separated, they have their own glass boxes. There's something about this office environment where you are with the like-minded people. They're sitting literally next to you with similar schedules, probably on the same project with the similar deadlines or whatnot. That just makes it easier to get into the flow. That's how it's always been for me. Right now, my schedule is all messed up because I'm doing sales and all sorts of other things. But normally, I would recommend like schedule your meetings in the morning, and then you can do some development, because otherwise you can't get into the flow like ever.
The question that's really interesting to me is how this is actually going to change physical architecture. Because here in Los Angeles, I go to parties and I talk to friends and they complain about traffic because they drive 45 minutes or an hour to get to Burbank, which is like 15 miles away or something. And just to go and sit in an office with those like-minded people and everything else. I agree that there's a certain requirement for people to be in that space together. I wonder if offices don't become this, like, I don't go to Burbank, I go close to here, and there's some little node where I get together with my design team and we do what we need to do like 3 days a week, and then the rest of the time we're off at our home. I can't imagine that this idea of like, let's get several 100,000 feet of like open floor office space is going to continue to persist. Not only in our industry, but in any industry.
Well, wasn't that the idea with WeWork? Are they still around?
Oh man,
They're still alive and well.
I don't know what time.
I think that's
so
an
WeWork
interesting
people on the podcast here.
for future section. I think that's a good point, Ian. Is I think that a lot of companies are assessing that, moving into the future as we all return to work, and it's a sequential return. It's probably not instantaneous. What is that going to look like, and how do we structure things and address things like hoteling and people who want to work from home and all that? So, all right, we've gone pretty long on time. We're going to end it with one more question. I appreciate everyone that's been hanging in with us the whole time. So the last question is looking a little bit more towards the future. For those that have, been working in various companies and doing specialization support, traditional Revit, engineering, all that stuff, and are possibly thinking about an idea they're chewing on or creating a company to pursue a niche specialization, what advice would you guys have to give to them based on all the things that you've learned along the way?
Don't do
it. No, that's the easy answer.
You guys go. You guys go ahead.
I have a couple I can share, I think. And they're not about the software side for sure. And I think it's more about running the office and running the business than just like how to write code, if that's what you were looking for.
Sure.
I know. I think one is I learned, like, find a mentor, especially on the business side. If you don't have experience, I have seen people making a lot of mistakes that they shouldn't be, and finding a mentor for business side that they have done it is going to be extremely helpful. The other thing is that one I made a mistake myself for a while. Just use the damn tool that other people use that you work with outside. I'm not talking about like architects, engineers. Like if you're an accountant, use a tool, just use that. Long term, that will save you a lot of time, because that's how it goes.
Get yourself some QuickBooks accounts.
Right. I didn't want to go for the tool, but just use that. Just save yourself time. Like I wrote a script that was much smarter than one tool I thought, but it didn't work because they were not used to use it. Wasted my time. We don't do that. And the third one is like get someone part-time to help you with office management, because you can't, like, I can't say like how much office management will take time. And like, especially if you have people working from different states, just reporting to these different states, going back, like all the tax, all those things, worker compensation. I don't know, like there are so many things. Get someone, like, and make sure you have enough money to do that before you start your company. Because otherwise your days and nights are just doing admin stuff instead of like doing the real work.
That is all fantastic advice, and certainly like the business side of things, that is not my specialization, and I find myself having to do this stuff, and it's kind of miserable. But if you equip yourself with the right tools, it's slightly less miserable. I feel like it's my kind of role in this discussion to give the cheerleading speech for somebody who wants to do this, because I 100% believe, and this is my experience, having built the tools that got acquired by Vela, and then Dynamo, and now Hypar, and it's just that, like, if you believe that there's a better way to do something, and it gets to the point where you're frustrated that this thing doesn't exist in the world, and the world isn't worth inhabiting. And I don't mean the world, don't kill yourself. I mean, like, the world of architecture isn't worth inhabiting if this tool doesn't exist. then you need to go and do it, because it's the only thing that's gonna it's gonna prove, yes, I think that thing should exist, and yes, other people thought that thing should exist, or no, it shouldn't, and maybe I should go pursue another idea. But especially if you're young, don't accept that your life in this industry needs to look exactly like your grandfather's life in this industry looked.
And I'm gonna be the most conservative of all the people out here. I don't know why. I was just joking, saying don't do it. Do it, totally do it. But make sure you you know what do they say? What do they say in America? Dot all the I's and cross all the T's first.
Mhm.
I didn't quit. I didn't quit my company that I was working at, my full-time job, until it just was unbearable, and I was basically safely assured I had about 2 or 3 different safety nets in place before I decided to quit. So the safety net that I would recommend people have in place is save up some money. Make sure that you have a little bit of savings, because once you go out there, you're gonna learn really quickly that that those paychecks don't come in every week anymore. So you're gonna need a savings account. Another thing that I had to do was I basically got my I piggybacked on my wife's health insurance. That's another thing that if you live in America, when the health insurance is not publicly available for everyone, it's freaking expensive. So make sure you have some money saved up for that, or you have your parents or whoever else is going to provide that for you. That's an important thing to have. And I don't know what else is there.
Yeah. I think as the most recent immigrant on this call, I want to just talk, if we have immigrants like listening who are on H-1B and all those things, that you don't have the privilege of like doing that thing, you know, when you decide to do it. So yeah, I think, okay, who knows like if immigration will be back with this administration, but it will be back at some point and you will have the chance. Like my suggestion is, if you want to do it, I'm really like, in this case, I don't think you should take the risk. And I have talked to several people. I think it's worth the wait, like similar to what Konrad said, to get to the point that you make sure if you fail, it's not going to just like turn your life upside down. You know, these things are all valuable, but at the end of the day, and again, I'm downplaying what we do and everything, and it's exciting. We're trying to make something that really changes the industry, but your life is more important. Your happiness is more important. And when it's the right time, then like listen to what Ian said and just like go for it. What will be the worst if you fail, you know? And then if that thing is something that you can tolerate, just totally do it.
Yeah, I should qualify. My whole premise here comes from a place of privilege, right? Like I don't have the immigrant experience. I grew up as a middle class white kid, you know, like, and went to a great college and traveled around the world and like did all this stuff. So like, yeah, my whole experience is honed by that. So yes, a lot of Mostapha's points are very well taken.
And it wasn't just like it's okay. No one should feel bad. I think like it's great to have. I wish everyone had the privilege, right? Because that's the right thing to be. And I think like it's great that you guys have the privilege to make a change. And now I have that privilege too. But just like I thought, like, because I always read this thing of like, yeah, when you finish your college, just leave your thing and go travel around the world. For an immigrant, that means you can't leave the country because your visa will be expired. Like, what are you even talking about? But again, like we have both sides, and I think it's like if people be patient, at least I think America, with all the things that we talk about, I came here. The plan was to go back in a year, and I still stayed because I found something valuable. And the reason I can do what I'm doing is because I stayed in this country. So the time will come, and I think you should be more patient if you are an immigrant, unfortunately. But yeah, you can do the right thing at the right time if you just take your time. And thanks to open source and all these great things that's happening, you don't need a lot of money to start anything. You can just get started while you're an immigrant, get involved in these projects that exist. Just build your reputation, build your knowledge. And when the time comes that you can do it, just go and do it.
Awesome, guys. That's great advice, and I really appreciate not only that you guys took your time to share here, but to build on those comments. By you guys sharing your experiences and your stories, you're showing other people the kind of pathways that exist not only in the industry, but in this community in general. And to build on your comment, Mostapha, about community, I really appreciate that, or about mentors, sorry, is that not only do you say look for a mentor, but you guys have all inspired so many, like the next generation of technologists. And I just personally want to say thanks for that. And also that the message to everybody is that technology is really the key to the future of the AEC industry. And if you have an idea to build something or you want to start a new company, there's awesome people that are doing things and have done things in this industry, and we're just looking to build a larger community and build more expertise, more people that are curious enough to take that risk. So awesome to have you guys all share that with us today. We really appreciate it. And please, for all of you out there listening, tune in to future sessions of Your Desk University. This session will immediately go up on YouTube. So if you found this interesting, go ahead and share with all your friends and colleagues in your network. And with that, I think we'll call this session a wrap. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kyle.
Take care. Great talking to you guys.